Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Shore, and welcome to the fourth event in our BioArt Kitchen Hangout series presented by IOTA Institute and Incubator Art Lab. Today, we acknowledge that though we are gathering virtually across territories and 4 time zones, we remain rooted in our physical communities on Indigenous land. IOTA is hosting this event from Chipuktuk, currently known as Halifax, on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And our partners at Incubator Art Lab are joining us from the territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of the First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. Our other artists, players, and friends are joining us from Toronto, Lisbon, and Vienna, and our virtual spaces are not exempt from the legacies of colonialism and imperialism that are present in those territories. If you're watching this live, you might notice that closed captions aren't yet available. There might be some auto captions if you're watching on Facebook, but they're a little touch and go. So in the description, you'll find a link to our live transcript, which is much more accurate than those auto captions. And this live transcript also allows us to create more accurate closed captions after we're done streaming. And those will be added to the YouTube video in about a week. So if you would prefer to come back and watch those closed captions, that'll be up and running by May 14th. And if you'd prefer to just watch the video and have that live transcript going, you're welcome to do that. So IOTA has mailed a custom deck of cards designed by bioartist Marta de Menezes to 4 lucky players around the world. And this is our first BioArt card game. Welcome, everyone. The cards, which everyone has in their hands, hello. They feature bioartwork and prompting questions on the ethics, boundaries, and challenges of the BioArt world. Marta de Menezes is a Portuguese artist who is currently the artistic director of Ectopia, an experimental art laboratory in Lisbon, and also the director of Cultivamos Cultura in the South of Portugal. She has been exploring the intersection between art and biology and working in research laboratories, demonstrating that new biological technologies can be used as an art medium. IOTA's artistic director, Mireille Bourgeois, is also behind the scenes running the live stream. She might pop in and say hello. And in the meantime, I'm so grateful that we've got so many amazing players from around the world joining us. So I'd like to introduce them. First, feel free to wave as I say hello and say your name. So first off, Becka Barker is an artist, educator, researcher, and cultural worker focused on collaborative practices in experimental animation and other time-based media. Mary Maggic is a non-binary artist working at the intersection of body and gender politics and ecological alienations, using biohacking and public amateurism as critical practice. As a complex and integrated systems thinker, Kelly Schneer is a socially minded, science-driven doer. She strives to bring big ideas and hold space safely. She identifies the ocean and all the fresh waters that connect to it. And Joel is a media artist based in Toronto with interest in bioart. He is assistant professor in computational art at York University and the director of Sensorium, Center for Digital Art and Technology. And last but certainly not least, guiding us game is Dr. Jennifer Willett, director of Incubator Art Lab and Canada Research Chair in Art, Science, and Ecology at the University of Windsor. So take it away, Jennifer, and let the games begin. Oh, Jennifer, I think you might be muted.
There we go.
Hello.
I'd also like to take. Hi. I just want to take a moment to also thank our sponsors, the Canada Council for the Arts, as well as the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. So thank you so much for having me, Amanda and Mireille. I know you're off screen, but it's always a pleasure working with you in these contexts. So today we're going to try an alternate form of engaging with an artist, Marta de Menezes, sort of a cornerstone practitioner and researcher in the bioart community internationally. And we're using playing cards based on her artistic practice. I say playing cards, they could also be tarot cards, hard to say. So what we've done is we've collected these cards, we've all spent some time with them, and now we're here with some really amazing artists and thinkers from around the world to engage in gameplay, card play with Marta, as well as discussion about her work and even their work or bioart more generally. So the first round today is going to be dealer's choice. And Amanda, you are our dealer today. So Amanda has two cameras today. One is on her face speaking with us, and one on her hands. So Amanda, I'm going to let you start card game conversation.
Wonderful. We're keeping Marta on her toes by just choosing some random cards. So I'm going to ask, first off, for somebody to give me a number between 1 and 18. Anyone? 9. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Great. And now I'm going to ask somebody to give me a number. I guess I should shuffle them. Some dealer. I'm not ready for Vegas. It's okay. And then somebody to give me a number between 1 and 17.
2.
Okay. So, Marta, you have the choice between these two cards. So one says bioart, the community is big, wide, and inclusive. And the other says truly natural and has a bunch of text. Which would you like to start with?
Ooh, I don't think I can. I don't think I should start with an artwork straight away. I think I should start with the bioart community because it's always nice to recognize that you are a member of a community, and I'm very grateful that I am a member of this community, and I love very much how broad, how wide, how distributed it is, and also how wonderfully welcoming it has been to me and to so many other artists that are coming. So this slide is, or this card, I should say, is a card that I use usually to explain that I am not the only person in the world doing anything, and I haven't invented the wheel. And more importantly, that somehow during the 20 years that I've been working in biology laboratories, my network of not only scientists but very much other artists has grown very, very much. And I can't think of a single one that is not nice. So this may sound very lame, but I can't think of one that is not nice and not interesting and wonderful to know and talk to and engage with and to understand. I have some of my favorite ones here with me, which is fantastic. But not to take away any of the others. On that card, you have actually Ken Rinaldo, who's a wonderful person and a wonderful artist, and he's kept me in awe for all the time that I've known him and even before. You have here also Maja Šmrker from Slovenia, and she's an amazing person as well. I feel very privileged that she is a friend and she's a colleague, and her work is absolutely mind-blowing. You have Tara Rhoda. She's from New York. She's a younger artist. She works at the SVA with Suzanne Anker, who's another amazing artist. And Tara always amazes me and surprises me with her work, which is always a wonderful thing. And lastly, you have Paul Vanus, who's also a very good friend of mine, who's also someone I admire and have admired for a very long time, and we do know each other for a very long time as well. So it's nice to just remind everybody that we're not alone, and that part of our success and our growth and the good parts of our work is that we are a part of this community.
Marta, I think that's an excellent way to start off this discussion. And before we go on to the next round of cards, I want to ask our other players, is there anyone else who'd like to comment on the notion of community in the bioart world? No? Okay, then we'll move on to the next hand.
Well, I can jump in and chatter a little bit. I mean, I think of it insofar as I think of the importance of community in any kind of practice, artistic or otherwise. And you know, as you said in the very beginning, Marta, you know, I think we can extrapolate to, like, there's nobody here inventing the wheel, or the only one. You know, there's always somebody else having similar thoughts, you know, and it's so great when you can find those people who are kindred that way, and makes work so much richer.
You're absolutely
All
right.
right. Thank you. So we're going to go on to the next round of play. The next round is called cherry picking. A player chooses their favorite card. I'm going to offer this opportunity up to Mary Maggic. Mary, would you like to tell us what your favorite card is?
Okay, I have to search a little bit because I don't think I chose a favorite card because all of them are really interesting. I guess I liked this card in particular, the one
Okay.
that's questioning nature,
Yeah.
and there's a picture of young Marta.
I was young once
Still young, still young.
in many ways.
Yeah. So I like this question because I feel like so much of what we do as artists in the bioart community is really bending this question or this definition of nature. And I know for myself and my own work, a lot of my work is inspired by xenofeminism, which is if nature is unjust, then change nature, to quote directly from the manifesto. And not to claim that I understand the whole concept of xenofeminism 100% correctly, but one of the things that always repeats in my head is how are these notions of eco-heteronormativity acting as barriers to acknowledging all of the alienness and weirdness and variation that we have in this planet, and how so much of it feeds into body and gender politics, and also taxonomies, unjust taxonomies, taxonomies of violence. And so a lot of this is very present in my work and in my research. So yeah, that's my angle on questioning the definition of nature.
Thank you, Marin. Thank you for bringing that up. That is absolutely true, and I understand, and I empathize with your position as well, in as much as it's possible for me to do so, which is, you know, empathy is about that as well. I often explain at the very beginning of any of my talks that I am an artist who works mostly on identity. And I think the question of nature and how it relates to identity really is what you were, or touches very much what you were describing. So for me, understanding and repositioning and re-questioning issues of identity are absolutely fundamental to make better decisions. Trying to understand where we come from, what is behind us, what happened before, to better understand who we are and how we understand the world, and then to try and with that information and with that realization, make better choices for who we want to be, is absolutely fundamental in today's society. I think it's something that we need to be more and more aware of, and one of my big interests is to try and campaign for that in as much as possible. And that part of that is recognizing that we use criteria, and this is why I question nature. We use criteria that come to us from moments in time and cultural constructs that need to be rethought, and they can be rethought through new knowledge, but also through old knowledge, through knowledge in general. They just need to be repositioned. They need to be rethought. They need to be rethought again and again and again, so we can make better decisions, and we can be better ourselves, and also as society in general.
Marta, I want to jump in on that. In relationship to Mary's question, I remember a piece that you did a number of years ago for a curatorial project of mine, where we ordered you a 7-gendered organism to Banff National Park, so that we could talk about these other models that maybe nature already presents to us about gender, that are not binary. Can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Sure. The organism is called Tetrahymena thermophilia. It's actually an incredibly common organism. I think almost, from what I understand, almost every pond in the world has some of those. And one of its, it blew my mind, okay, to understand so many things about this organism. And this is why I wanted to use it, not even try to manipulate it in any way, just because the organism itself is so mind-blowing, and it breaks so many of our pre-established understandings of how we are and who we are and what we are. So Tetrahymena is a 7-sexed organism, and it's interesting to even ask what does that mean, right? What are 7 sexes? What does sex mean in this context? Because it's a biological knowledge kind of context. So what does sex mean there? And the scientists tend to use the interexchange the word gender and sex very easily, which is something that is a little bit confusing. It's already confusing for me because sex and gender in Portuguese is the same word, basically. So it's very confusing to distinguish both, but there is distinction. And everything needs to be contextualized, especially when you name something. So it was very difficult to understand what do they mean by 7 sexes, but also I don't think they know for sure, or it's not exactly very clear, because one of the most amazing things about this organism is that they have 7 sexes, as they say, and this explained means that they have an identity, a sexual identity, and they can exchange genetic material with all of the other sexes, but not with the same one. So this is already, okay, what does, again, because we are human and because we do project everything onto these organisms, and they and anything that we learn, we project onto ourselves as well. So where are the similarities, and how can we understand ourselves better just by understanding this? This is really, it's very cool just to go through understanding what these things mean. They also they have 7 sexes supposedly because they are very good at adapting to different temperatures. This is why I say they're all over the world. So in a cold environment, they will have more numbers of 2 or 3 sexes. In a warmer environment, they will have more numbers in a community of other 3 sexes. And somehow they're able to exchange genetic material and adapt very quickly by producing the genders or the sexes that they need to adapt to constraints in their environment. So this is for me it's mind-blowing kind of understanding of what exists already and how they without culture obviously how nature organizes itself and uses something like sex to be a clear advantage in terms of endurance to environmental stress.
Anyone else want to comment before we move on to the next round?
Actually, yes, if you don't mind, I have a question from the audience. We have David Wimberly asked earlier, community in nature is so much more beyond human identities. What about communities of trees, of ecosystems, of mycelia? And actually, I'm thinking, Marta, of your work with Auntie Marta and, sort of all of your ideas around like selfhood and individuality and coexistence as well. So that's a few thoughts in one, but I wonder if you could comment on community.
Sure, I would comment more on identity because I think identity in that question is more key as a concept. And I don't think about identity as something that is solely human. Okay, so I am Marta, and that is part of my identity. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I am a friend. I'm a sister. I'm a lot of things, but I'm also a woman. I'm also human. I am all of the organisms that exist in me and within me. That's also a part of my identity. And maybe here, and so I live in Lisbon, so that is also part of my identity. And the organisms that share the space that I live in and the environment that I'm with are also a part of my identity. So I don't limit the identity question, never, to just a human individual. I think more than ever, we need to understand that our identity is unavoidably, and in its core is linked to that of the planet. And we can't make a decision that won't have an impact on some way on the other side of the world. And it's important to understand that as well. But talking about, so whenever I think about identity and going back to the card that you pulled in the project Auntie Marta and the work that I've been doing in terms of understanding a little bit more of the immune system. The immune system has always been very fascinating for me because one of the major concepts of the immune system is the idea of self and non-self. And even just saying self and non-self, not saying self and other, is for me very interesting. Why did they decide to call the opposite of self non-self? And I think that may be very enlightening in terms of, or maybe mind changing. Instead of doing a dichotomy between self and other, doing a dichotomy between self and non-self, I think maybe a little bit less aggressive somehow, or not necessarily not limiting us to the differences, but also to similarities. So the non-self doesn't mean it's something other or something alien or something different. It may be something very similar, but still the immune system recognizes it as non-self. And this is a very interesting conceptual subtlety within immunology that I'm looking into. Auntie Marta is very much about that. So I've exchanged a portion of skin with my husband, with my life partner, when we've been together for 21 years. And that led to me personally, as an artist, as a person, to an affirmation of self. by a system in my body that is not related or not specifically linked to my brain. So identity usually we associate with our brain. And in this case, or in immunology, you know that the system in your body that's more capable of differentiating you from non-you is your immune system and not your brain. Your brain messes up everything because it also messes up the immune system, actually, sometimes.
So I need to move on to the next player. Is that okay, Marta?
That is, I want to have more interaction. Don't just ask me questions, interrupt me.
So, Becca Barker, you are up. I'm going to give you the game of chance. I want you to shuffle your deck with a loose hand and show us the first card that falls out.
Okay. So the first one that falls out. Oops, that's a chunk. Not good at the loose hand thing. Okay.
That's why it's loose.
Okay, so the first one I saw was cultivamoscultura.org.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, or do you want me to ask you?
Is there something that puzzles you about that card, or you just want me to talk about Cultivamos Cultura?
I guess I would like to I'd like to know more about perhaps the I keep coming back to this word nature when I want to ask something. I've been writing notes like the nature of this and the nature of that, and so I keep thinking about the language around nature and being. But yeah, how what is the nature of collaboration and interaction perhaps with this entity? Coming back to sort of my the earlier comment about community and interaction, I think of ideas coming from interaction, obviously, much as life and what we consider to be natural as the result of interaction. So I wonder what you might want to say to that.
Actually, it's very well chosen, the card. Cultivamos Cultura. There's a lot that can be said. I suppose that one of the characteristics of these cards, and maybe it is more of a tarot game and not a card game, is that that they're multi-layered, I suppose. And Cultivamos Cultura, like any other thing, is very multi-layered. Cultivamos Cultura has a story. It was actually the house where my husband's grandparents lived, and it's a agricultural center of the family. Not anymore. They passed away much earlier than we moved into Cultivamos Cultura and made it into a residency place. But that's part of its history. It's in the center of a very small town with a very interesting community made of many different people, and that's one of the things that I love about São Luís. So São Luís is the town where Cultivamos Cultura is, and it's on the edge of a natural park. Which is an interesting natural park because all of the natural park is owned land and farmed land. So it's also interesting that it's a reserve, a natural reserve that is farmed, and the ecosystem is unique because of it. But São Luís has a lot of people from many different places around the world, which is one of the most interesting things about it. You would have to visit to understand how it's the center of the universe, and it's very interesting because of it. It's actually it was like most small towns in Portugal. It was a very aged town, so all of the young people move into the city, and most of the population was older. For some reason, a few years ago, it started to become interesting, and some young couples and families moved in, and they came from many different places, from around Portugal and from elsewhere, and now the community has welcomed them. They're part of a completely integral part of the community, and it's calling more and more people in, which is very interesting. There's a lot of artists, and a few years ago as well, they started organizing a festival in the summer. And before that, people knew that there were artists around, but the artists didn't know each other. And when this festival started, all the artists suddenly understood what other artists were doing, and the community became a lot stronger for it, which was incredibly heartwarming for us to see. So Cultivamos Cultura exists a little bit longer than all of this movement, but we are most certainly a part of that community. Cultivamos Cultura hosts artists from around the world, and invites people from around the world to come to a very small place like São Luís. And São Luís has raised to the challenge with flying colors. They welcome everybody. They show the amazingness of being a small place in a small country, and having an amazing quality of life with all the culture that involves. I think I couldn't say more wonderful things about the town of São Luís. If I had more time, I would continue on saying more.
Any other comments or questions from the group on that topic?
I would love to hear you elaborate more. I know you want more interaction, and I'm asking you to talk more. But this idea that you said that it was on the edge of a natural park, but that it had been agricultural before that. Can you explain that a little bit more, or tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, this is the interesting part between Europe and the American continent. Europe has been here for such a long time with people roaming around and fighting for territory that you don't have anything that's natural anymore, right? There's no tree that hasn't been planted. There's no nothing that hasn't been landscaped. We've just been here for too long. So the concept of a natural park is always a very difficult one to get a consensus on. Okay, so if you put a line, an imaginary line, on any part of Europe and declare it a natural park, you know that everything that is there was put there at some point in history of Europe. So what does it mean to be natural in that context? And how back do you want to revert it to? All of these rewilding projects that you have happening around Europe are always incredibly difficult, because there's always it's jokingly and poorly comparing, it's like a restoration of an old painting. How far do you want to go back in terms of restoring something? Back to the canvas? Because we can go back to the canvas, but you can always go back to even more, the threads and the chalk and the oil and the cotton that the canvas was made of. So the concept of natural park is something that I find very interesting to engage with, because of things like this. In Europe, it's very difficult. Yes, Kelly, you can just interrupt.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I know that's quite a difference between the old and the new worlds, right? So I've been wrestling with it, with the center of our cities and why we're here. And then In fact, most of the time it's an industrialized port with great access for shipping. So this concept is the generational differences and the way that people interact and perceive the natural spaces. And it has a name. It's called the shifting baseline syndrome. And so in Halifax, the harbor has entered a life after shifting baseline syndrome. And this life past the point of no return. It's a concept of the ecosystem, which protection doesn't warrant any thought. So we've accepted the harbor standing as a dead place in our collective imagination. And it's an untouchable place, really. It's a limitless sink, often in our behavioral patterns. And overcoming that is something that takes, I think, creative solutions that we can only do through integrated efforts like bioart.
You talk about going back, and Kelly, here you're talking about thinking about how to overcome something and go forward. I think it all speaks to this idea of that we're constantly becoming, and that this is actually bioart is always time-based in some way.
Yeah, that's an amazing connection. Thank you.
Yeah, and I might want to add too, Kelly Becker, and just to bring up something that Mary was mentioning at the start with relation to community and DIY biopractice. I think the pandemic has really opened our eyes to the microbes and the contagion potentials around us. So in a sense, we have a whole generation of people that are growing into this biotechnological literacy, and for a long time now, bioartists have also been catalyzing communities by encouraging them to engage in these citizen science activities, and a lot of them have to deal with conservation practices. But there are of course some of them that are also a little. Mary will be able to tell you a lot more about some of these deviously queer experiments that you may be able to do. But
Devious.
but a lot of it is really important because they start that conversation as well. In terms of the collective imagination, I think that's the role of these really interesting and really alternative practices that help us think about a particular space at a different scale, a different time duration, different perspective.
Awesome. All right, we're going to go on to the next hand. And Joelle, it's your turn. I'm going to give you tag team number 4. I want you to hold up 2 cards, and I want you to choose a player to select the left or right card.
Oh, okay. Oof. Okay, what haven't we done? Oh. Immediately got subsumed within the petri dish of. Okay, so I can describe it. We have the one on my left that is about methodology. It has a systems diagram, and on the right we have Cultivamos Cultura Goes Digital Exhibition Garden and Ars Electronica 2020.
And Joelle, who are you going to ask to pick?
I'm going to pick Kelly.
Thanks. I'm going to pick the methodology and reflection, and perhaps ask a question to inquire about the scientific processes, and in addition to this, speaking of learning from the exhibition, but then how does the scientific process fit into that? And perhaps how has your methodology, Martha, changed over time?
Thank you, Kelly. So this is not a diagram of a scientific methodology. Okay, this is actually taken from design thinking. And design thinking was actually from, when I encountered design thinking, I have a very good friend who's a designer, and her expertise is design thinking, actually. But when I first encountered some of the design thinking diagrams, one of the striking moments was looking at the first stage of the project, which is empathy. And I never saw any field of knowledge, any serious field of knowledge that would start a diagram for methodology with empathy. I don't necessarily empathize with what they describe as empathy. Somehow, so my understanding of empathy is a little bit broader or narrower. I don't know, but this is actually it. All of the other steps were, well, one, they made me understand something or proved to me something that I already understood, which was methodology is not that different in terms of steps that we go through. Yes, I think all of you understand the idea of a hypothesis and steps to achieve any understanding of what that hypothesis can be proven or disproven, or in the case of art, it doesn't have to be disproven at all, or proven, by the way. But steps like these are something that is not challenging to most fields of knowledge that we understand and recognize within and without academia. So it's very useful for me to use this as a basis to understand what I do and to explain what I do to students and to other artists and to scientists, because I spend a lot of my time explaining to scientists how I go about doing art. And it's also very important for me that they understand that I begin with something which is, for me, very important, which is first something that I like. But more than that is something that allows me to put myself in another position. Empathy by definition, or if you go to a dictionary and look at what empathy is being able to put yourself in another person's shoes. I would take that a little bit further, and it's not just another person, it's another thing. I can put myself into the position of a rock, and it will still be a shift in position, and it will still be useful for me to understand a different perspective. And sometimes, or actually all the time, this is the beginning of something, always the beginning of something. Putting yourself in another place and doing that exercise of shifting your perspective is always the beginning of something. And it's a fundamental step into learning anything. And this is why I love it. Yeah, this is why it's the beginning of all my projects. And so this is what the methodology is for me. The first step is the empathy, and the empathize with something or with nothing or with whatever my imagination can help me with. And it's always about learning and going through a process of trying to understand what I'm looking at, how I'm looking at it, what other people or what other forms of knowledge allow me to shift my perception and learn something. And then it becomes something more close to an idea of what I want to achieve with the piece. And then eventually it becomes a prototype. And that prototype is only complete when it reaches the test stage, which is actually when it reaches the public. When art for me only becomes art when the public looks at it and does something with that, with the confrontation of the piece itself. So all of the stages are always feeding onto other projects, to other steps of this methodology, and I'm always working on different things at the same time. Did that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, that and then some. Thank you. I immediately think about my friend the lobster, who is, I know biologically immortal creature. And if we learnt interesting and brilliant kind of and shared concepts like that with people, would we treat the lobster and its habitat the same way? So yeah. I needed to share that.
Before we move on, I want to open it up to the floor. Are there any other comments on methodology, design thinking, or empathy?
Yeah, I just want to say, the thing that struck me so much about this card, I think, was that, in conversations that I've had, actually, in my doctoral studies, where I was mentored by a group of musicians who didn't know very much or didn't appreciate very much about bioart, and a lot of this came from these differences in methodology. So in a sense, it's interesting to see now. How bioart can be an example of this methodology. This isn't a methodology for bioart, as like a given rule per se, right? But bioart's an example of how this methodology can be a catalyst for seeing things across disciplines, I want to say the age-old kind of the artist that focuses entirely on empathy and then doesn't care what happens when his or her work is out in the open. That is all gone, right? And the converse is true, that where the scientist begins a work thinking about a hypothesis that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with her heart, and then going through the testing and hypothesis process without caring about society or its implications on the environment. I also think that's a dated concept. So I thank you very much for sharing this new system.
I don't see it as new at all.
Yeah. It was a beautiful card.
Thank you.
I just want to actually also reiterate that my interest in this as well, and what you said, Marta, about putting yourself in the position of people or things or entities that are not you. One of my very first assignments that I host in most of my classes is I tell my students that they have to go somewhere where they don't belong. And it results in some of the most beautiful stories of them going places and either finding out they do belong or that they don't belong, but actually they really like people, or, these sort of moments where you can see yourself in the other, but also understand the difference between yourself and the other that you might be encountering. So I think this is a wonderful methodology. And I think you're absolutely right, Joelle. I think it can be a way of describing interdisciplinary interloping, strategies for moving outside of the space where you belong or the discipline of knowledge that you work in. We're going to go to round 5. And Kelly, this is your turn. You get eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Pick a card by playing the eeny, meeny, miny, mo game. I think that one comes from my kids.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So we have nature from 1999. There is a specimen, a fruit, and a very close-up microscopic picture. And it asks, what are the criteria you are using to determine if something is natural or not? And I think this question is an individual one, but also one that we look at from a work-based lens. How are we altering it, and how did it come to us? For me, I instantly think about microplastics and the idea of there being more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050. And that is one depressing concept. It's an issue that we can talk about, perhaps a problem that we can solve collectively, but it's not something I like to think about too often. That's for sure.
It's a hard thing to it's very hard not to give in to the despair that overcomes you when you realize or when you think a little bit harder on how much shit we've done, right? Because as the only organisms on the planet that can actually understand, or not, I'm not sure if it's understand that's the right word, but realize the impact of that, and also realize the impotence of what we can actually do individually is a little bit overwhelming. I think it's one of the things that's more overwhelming nowadays, is to realize that there's very little that you can do to change anything, and still understand the enormous responsibility that is over your shoulders, because you're a member of the species, because you are a part of the system, because it's not very possible to not be a part of the system. And even if you're not, it's still the system is still there, and it's still damaging a lot. It's like watching a train crash, and you can't look away, and you can't do anything to prevent it. And how can you not get overwhelmed with a situation like this? So I do empathize a lot with what you were saying, and it's complicated. It's really complicated. But I think one of the most important things that we need to realize is that complicated is something that we need to live with and to understand. It's about growing up, I think. For me, this is about growing up. It's about taking responsibility and understanding that there's no black and white, but there's shades of gray that we can look forward to, or move, or try to push forward, at least. I have kids, and they're going to inherit a bucket load of problems. Yep.
Anyone else?
Can I just jump in because
Yes, please, Mary.
I just want to jump in because I feel like these topics are always on my mind, like how to live and cope and act in a permanently polluted and destroyed world. I feel like, even though I'll be just running a workshop on, hormones in your urine, but then, the context of that is like, there's all of these, toxicities in the environment. It's all like queering our bodies. And I feel like in those workshops, like 99% of the time, like everyone is just like frozen in panic. And I'm trying to let's do the workshop, guys, but everyone is like, oh my God, like existential crisis. And I think it's a challenge, but it's also, it's a very interesting challenge for me, because how do you, as an artist who is working in, affect and empathy and things like that, like how do you as the artist neutralize that fear and try to create these new connections and new subjectivities in people that are, not a product of, panic or fear or, which comes from this prescribed, like from the top down, like your world is not the world that you were taught in school. Like your body is not the body that you see in the textbooks. That's where the fear comes from. And so how do you get people to start thinking that, you can be the agents of change, and you can be the one who imagines, you can be the one that writes your own fictions about how to perceive the world? Because the fear and the panic, like this is another tool of patriarchy, right? It's another tool of colonialism. So we need to act outside of that fear, and to really we need our creativity to come up with solutions, right? And we don't have creativity if we're all in fear. So yeah.
Thank you, Mary. That was the perfect addition to what I was saying, and I do believe exactly what you say. Yeah, we can't be frozen in fear. We can't give up. Yeah, we do. You know, the more we do in our dimension, which is a small dimension, but it's still a dimension. In the more we can do, the more of us that start doing it, then we're moving in the right direction. Yeah, then we're making the good choices. That actually, this is very nice. It just came around, the whole conversation came around to, for me, the issue of identity and making good choices, better choices for the who we want to be, and how we want to be, and what we want to be.
Before I move on to, like, first of all, that was excellent. I agree, Marta. It's a beautiful circular conversation. Before we move on to the lightning round, I just want to say, Marta, is there a specific card you would like to discuss at this point? I want to allow you to curate some of the conversation.
Ay. I'll go to like Joel and ask what hasn't been done before. I don't know.
It's okay. We can move on to the lightning round. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that you wanted to interject at this point or that we'd missed.
No, we're okay.
All right. Then, guys, we're going to play a game. It's called the lightning round. We're all going to take turns holding up. We're going to hold up cards, like 1, 2, 3, go. And if any of them match, that is the card. Okay, so everyone pick a card.
Question. Are we taking the ones that have been talked about before?
Oh, that's such a good idea. I love it. Okay. Everyone take the ones that have already been talked about. Out, nature, lamb hopping. Oh, these are good cards. Just the body, lamb hopping.
It's a good test as to whether I've been paying attention to the card.
Yeah.
I've cheated.
All right,
I was putting them aside.
Okay, everybody ready?
Okay.
Pick a card.
Yep.
1, 2, 3, go.
Do we have a match?
I think Joelle's and Marta's might match.
Oh, yeah. That was quick.
All right, bring it on. What do we got?
Oh, we have my future project. The things that this is a card of projects that don't exist yet, which is cool.
The favorite
like I said,
project.
Exactly. The favorite project is the moment project, right? Always. This is actually a very interesting project, and maybe I can explain a little bit of it, and some part of it will connect to a little bit of everything that we've been saying. So, actually, this project came to me when I was in Hong Kong with Dr. Yun. And I was doing I was doing a laser talk with Luis there, curated by Maru Pebo and Yun. And Dr. Jung was telling me that one of his students did an amazing kind of research. So can you basically what he was trying to explain was his student was looking into turtles and trying to understand the impact of toxicity in the ocean to turtles and their life. But you can't take turtles out of the ocean and test them, obviously, because that would mean killing or maiming the turtles, and you can't just go about doing that if you're protecting the species. And so the device that he created to try and understand how toxic waste was impacting on the tissues of turtles was the few ones that they catch and that go to shelters and recovery institutions. They can take some tissues out of them, and they can then take a piece of tissue out of an organism. You can then revert it back into a stem cell and then redifferentiate it into all of the tissues that belong to that organism. Yes. So you take any sample and you can basically go backwards in time, make it back into a stem cell, and then create all of the tissues that that organism is made of. And this is what they use then to test the impact of toxicity in the waters. And they get a lot of data like this. And crossing that knowledge with something that that Luis is researching on, which are B cells. So my husband is the immunologist that I work with, and he's researching on B cells. And B cells are cells in your body that are a part of your immune system, and they're some of the few cells in your body that don't have the same DNA as you. Which is also very interesting for me. So actually, the immune system constructs these cells and has a system of editing the DNA, making them different, making their DNA different from yours. They're still your cells. They're not only your cells, but they're a part of your immune system, which is the cells that differentiate you from not you, as I was talking about earlier. But they have a DNA that is different from yours, which is very interesting. And so my question was, if I could take some of these cells from my own body, which they're made by my body, so they are me, very much me. Not only they're me, but they are made by my body, and revert them into stem cells, and then redifferentiate them into all of the tissues of my body, would that sum of tissues be another me? And how do I relate to that set of new tissues? So this is distributed me. This is the project that I'm going to be doing in a few months.
Where on earth are you doing that, Marta? Who's going to let you do that?
I will be contacting the student Yun student to understand the protocols and more, because I want to understand exactly what are the limitations of something like this in terms of studying toxicity. Yes, because studying toxicity in a tissue is different than studying toxicity in a living organism. We all know, and the scientists know very well, that it's very different. You know, you can learn a few things, but you can't learn the whole context, right? Which is always interesting to me to ponder this, the limitations of decontextualizing, which is one of the things that is more common to find in science. It's about decontextualizing almost everything, right? And they are very aware of it. So I'm trying to also learn how they overcome those kinds of hurdles. But also I want to learn how they do this, because I have done already some differentiation. I took some stem cells and differentiate them into neuron cells, and I do know how this is done. It's very easy. It's tissue culture 101, and basically you just change the chemicals that induce the differentiation of the cells. I am pretty sure that it's different for different tissues, but I'm also interested in, so Yun is also researching on how matrices, textured matrices, actually induce differentiation of cells as well, which for me is really interesting as well. So a surface can actually induce differentiation of cells into muscle cells, for instance, And this is very interesting for me as well. So I will be going between Yoon's lab, I think, and Luis's lab. B cells are easy to find. Fortunately, I don't have to have surgery to get my B cells, and I only need a small number because cells multiply.
Amanda, do I have time for one more lightning round?
I think if everyone's okay with it, we can go for one more real quick.
Sure. Yes, Joelle had to leave. He has to administrate a big meeting. But everyone else is here. Okay, everyone else, pick a card. We're going to stick it on our heads. Amanda, you're going to help us out so that we can. All right, 1, 2, 3, go.
Oh, we have a match between Kelly and Marta.
We tried 5 times on our tests before we got a match, and this time we get 2 in the first round.
I guess more players, yeah. Okay,
lab hopping. Lab hopping is good, but it's not necessary. So this card allows me to explain more than anything that I'm interested in that specific concept, which is identity. And any field or any knowledge that I find that allows me that shift in perspective, that putting myself into a different place to understand the limitations of what we see as identity. Is it small, or is it a core? Is it fixed? Am I always me? Is it dynamic? Is it changing? Anything that allows me to rethink preconceptions on identity is something that calls to me, and this allows me, or this mandates, the lab hopping. So I'm not attached to a specific technology. I'm not attached to a specific organism or material or tissue. I am attached to a concept, and wherever that concept takes me is the collaborator in a way. Is the material that's going to work with me to express whatever is puzzling me. And the technology to manipulate that material is the technology that I will have to use to pose the questions that I want to pose.
Interestingly, there's 2 questions on this card. One's from an art perspective and another's from a science perspective. So we have number 1 is what makes an art piece? And then number 2, what's your question/answer? So I think just the idea of artistic laboratories and scientific laboratories, and artistic questions and scientific questions themselves are really great from a technique perspective, right? How transparent is one? How open doors are the other?
Absolutely. These 2 questions actually come from questions that I'm asked very often. One question that I'm asked very often is, what is art? And is what you're doing art? Okay, and I'm pretty sure that Mary and Jennifer get these questions a lot as well. It was one of the first questions that I got when I started working in labs. Mostly because the scientists could see that on a daily basis I was doing exactly what they were doing in their labs. So they couldn't understand why I was telling them that actually what I'm doing is art and not science. And the second one is related to that because it's part of the reasons, or part of the answer to that question is I'm asking very different questions that you are. And even if the technique is the same or the technology is the same, even if the material is the same, the questions that I'm posing with the way I manipulate and use the technique is very different from the scientists. I am not trying to find a rule. I'm not trying to prove a hypothesis. I don't need reproducibility. And this is a fundamental change or difference between making the art or doing the science.
I have to ask you, if where you start with the concept and then find what you need to explore that, does the material ever kind of speak back to you and influence the questions you're asking?
Absolutely. It's part of working with the material. I can't do anything without working with the material. I need to know it. And knowing it, this is why I need to be in the lab working with the scientists. Part of knowing it is understanding the feedback that it gives to me. Yes, because if the material is not asking, if the material doesn't allow me to ask a specific question, then either I change the question or I find another material. Yeah, or do both, because both questions may be really interesting. And this is in that diagram. This is part of what happens when you're trying to when you're trying to identify exactly or define your question. Yes, the definition of your question comes from the interaction with the material and the technology that you're using to manipulate that material. The material allows you to understand that actually the question that it's posing is completely different from the one that you had before. And it may be more poignant, more to the point, more interesting, more relevant to me and to whoever is looking at the piece. And so I need to reformulate the question.
As we're wrapping up, any last questions or comments on this topic or any other from our panel? No? Then I would really like to take a moment to thank everyone. I'd like to thank the team at IOTA, Mireille and Amanda and Anna. I'd like to thank our players, Becca, Mary, Kelly, Joelle, and Marta de Menezes. I would like to thank you, Marta, for creating this beautiful deck and playing a game with us. It's just been such a pleasure. So thank you again, everyone. Amanda, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And also, if anyone watching wants to download their own deck, you can visit iotainstitute.com. And there's a printable one, there's a digital one, you can help yourself. But yeah, on behalf of IOTA, I just want to thank everyone for being so generous today. This was so wonderful.
Yes, Marta?
Right. Can I just say thank you as well? Thank you for engaging. Thank you for looking at the cards. Thank you for making the cards. Thank you for the invitation from Amanda and Mireille. Thank you, Jennifer, for managing the conversation. It's always a pleasure to join you in whatever you do. This is a really amazing project. Thank you all. It was a lot of fun. And I wish we could have been in the same space drinking beers and I would drink a cocktail, but still keep you company. And I'm sure we would continue on our conversations for a lot longer.
Sometime soon, I hope. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.